Hey folks, Lenny Lawson here, the car guru, with another story. You know, that's the funny thing about this business is they keep coming at you. You know, I don't have to create anything. All of this is just from experience and things that happen in the dealership. And here's a word of caution. If anybody comes at you and says, well, the book value is, you just tell them to stop right there and maybe put your fingers in your ears, because it doesn't matter what the book value is. The book won't buy them. Let me give you an example. So several weeks ago, we had this customer, good customer of ours here at Gateway Ford, and he was driving a 2022 F450. Now, why would you need an F450? You know, what most people drive are F150s. You know, that used to be called a half-ton pickup. You know, they had half-ton, three-quarter ton, 1 ton. Well, that nomenclature is out the window, and now it's just different series of trucks with different payload and towing capacities. For example, my truck, you know, it's a half-ton, okay, an F150. The comparable Chevrolet would be a Chevrolet Silverado 1500. The Ram also uses the thousands. They're 1500, 2500, 3500 and stuff. But anyway, this is a F450, and it's dually, which means it has dual rear wheels, has a long bed, 8-foot bed, yeah, crew cab. You know, the truck new was probably, back then, 2022, 95,000, somewhere in that neighborhood. So what do you need that for? Well, most people pull gooseneck trailers with those, real heavy trailers. You know, trailers that weigh anywhere from 18,000 pounds up to close to 30,000 pounds. So what's this guy pulling with this one? He's pulling a fifth wheel. So it was no problem for us to figure out what his F450 was worth. The problem was his fifth wheel camper. We don't know anything about campers. This is a 2022 DRV. Who knows what that's an acronym again. It stands for something. It's called a mobile suite. It's 41 feet long, and then it has some other letters here. It's nice. It's beautiful. It listed new for about $238,000. The book value, now you talk about depreciation. The book value on this thing is about $115,000. Boy, that would hurt. Imagine buying that and then 6 months later to say, you know, honey, I don't want to camp after all. That would make a serious ding in the 401k. But anyway, this guy really wanted to get out of this. He says, we're done with camping. So he first listed it with, what is it called, RV Trader, and was asking $129,000 for it. And that was hurting him bad. He was in pain after seeing that number. And then he got it down to $119,000. Well, we called a dealer. I'm not going to say the name of the dealer. It's a camping dealer, big time. They made us an offer. They're from out of state, but we needed what we call a buy bid. That means that they agree to buy this vehicle if we can get it for their price. Their price was $90,000. So we presented that to the consumer. They agreed to it. Ouch. And so we ended up parking it on the lot and trying to make arrangements with these yahoos over in North Carolina. They would not call us back. Numerous phone calls, no return phone calls. You know, when that happens, you think you're getting ghosted. And we were. There was no thinking about it. We were ghosted. And I was a little bit upset at my used car manager for letting that happen, not getting something in writing. But all of a sudden, today, I had a project. Yesterday, I had a project. I'm going to sell that thing. So I called Lazy Days down in Strawberry Plains near Knoxville. Finally got to the right person, He was nice. He said, well, give me the specs. I said, listen, all the specs are on RV Trader. Just go look at this particular vehicle. He found it real quickly. He said, oh, I see it. Boy, that is nice. That's a really nice camper. That's a really heavy camper, very high quality. I said, well, quality must not translate into resale value. He said, unfortunately, it does not. So he said, let me check with all of my buyers. I said, okay, call me back. Will you please? He said, yes, I promise I'll call you back. And so it wasn't 15 minutes later, he's calling me back. He says, I hate to even give you this number. I said, really? What is it? He said, $65,000. I said, that is not going to work, but I certainly appreciate it. So that's one place you don't go to sell your camper or your fifth wheel or whatever. So I knew that wasn't going to work. So back in 2018, I had an Airstream. It was called an Airstream Base Camp. It was a little small, little 18-foot, looked like a horse trailer. And I thought, well, since it's Airstream and it looks really cool, I think I'll try this and we'll go camping with my grandson. Well, we did. Have you ever tried to sleep inside of an Airstream? You know, it's all that metal. You got metal on the outside. Well, it's the same thing on the inside. There's metal everywhere. You turn on, and there's all kinds of little LED lights everywhere. Try to go to sleep with all that on. I don't see how they do it. They must wear those masks over their eyes. But anyway, that was my wife's problem. And plus, there just wasn't any room. I had to contort myself in order to be able to sleep with Cannon in the middle, my wife on one side, me on the other. I can't sleep that way, not with my body bent in kind of a half moon. So I decided, okay, I'm done with this experiment. So I made some phone calls, and I was just going to go big. So I went with what was it called? Bullet Premier. It's a 37-foot travel trailer, not a fifth wheel. And I found it in Statesville, North Carolina, because I had called around to numerous places. And again, the depreciation nightmare hit me on the Airstream. No, they don't hold their value either. And so, but anyway, this place offered me $20,000 more than anybody else was willing to offer me. And plus gave me what I thought was a pretty good discount on the camper. Of course, you can't trust that at all. But I just looked at the trading difference, and it was only, I think it was $12,000 trading difference. So I said, okay, I'll bring you the base camp and bring back the Bullet Premier. And we've enjoyed it. I mean, we camp, it's really worth it because we camp 2 times a year, maybe. Last year, we didn't camp any. Previous year, we camped 4 times. So on average, that's 2 times a year. So I decided to call that place up. Boy, I hope I don't jinx this. I really don't, because I don't have money in hand yet. But I talked to this receptionist. She said, well, I'll have our boss call you. She did. It was a she. And I gave her the same information that I gave the guy down in Strawberry Plains. And she said, okay, so it's on RV Trader. Yeah, okay, I see it here. You got all the pictures and everything. They're asking $119,000. She said, how much do you want for it? And I said, well, in order to make this deal work, we need $95,000, which was a little bit more than I actually needed. See, that's what you do. And so she said, let me call you back. About 20 minutes later, she called me back. She said, I checked with the authorities, the people that buy these things, and they said $92,500. And I kind of restrained myself just a little bit. I said, okay, oh well. Okay, sold. So I kind of stunned her. She's thrilled because I don't guess she has bought a lot of different vehicles. She sounded overly exuberant. So I am hoping, well, she did send me a text and say needed to know exactly where it is so she could arrange transportation. So I think this is going to happen. Okay, so I started this whole thing talking about what's something worth and can you go by book value? The answer is no. If you're shopping for a car, think the same thing works for cars. And you may have one dealer offer you $20,000 for your car and another one offers you $12,000. And, you know, what you have to do is what I'm going to tell you to do here in just a minute. So what the book says your vehicle is worth is not what it's worth. I don't care if it's KBB.com. What's the other one? J.D. Power is a new one. It used to be called the NADA book. And so, let me finish that thought. There's a black book that car dealers use. You don't have access to it. There's the Manheim auction report. You don't have access to it either. Now, what do those auction reports tell us? Well, I can look online and I can see a vehicle. I can see a condition report that has been put together by an independent third party. I mean, they do everything from measuring the tread depth of the tires to actually isolating every dent and every ding. They even estimate what it's going to take based on typical dealer cost to get this car frontline ready. I mean, it's pretty accurate. It's not 100% accurate. Plus the fact that we can buy insurance, and we do. It costs about $200 and something a car, that if the car is not as represented when they ship it to us, if we buy it online, then we can send it back. No questions asked. So that's a pretty good deal. You can't do that. No, you can't even do that with Vroom or Carvana. They say you can, but just try it. Okay, so the book values are of no value to you. You can go to Edmunds.com, like I say, KBB or all of them, and you'll get variations in what the value is. How can you use that? Well, it's a guide. You know, one of the things that I would do is just go online and find vehicles just like yours with mileage that's about the same and see what dealers are asking for them online. And if they're, for example, if they have a car just like yours and they're asking, you see one that's 24,000, one that's 26, one that's 25, you can just kind of get about 10 of them or 5 of them, average them. Make sure you're comparing apples and apples, like different trim packages, different, options that it may have. One may have a sunroof, one may not. You got to find something that's pretty much just like yours. 4 or 5 of them, and then average them, and then subtract about 3,000 to 4,000. That's about what a dealer's going to give you for your vehicle. That's a closer approximation than anything that KBB says or any of the others. Then another really important thing is to compare that to your payoff. I mean, if you owe money on your vehicle and you owe $10,000, $12,000 more on it than what that number comes out to be, you just have to understand that when you go into trade cars, that payoff does not just go poof and go away. If the dealer pays you $25,000, you owe $35,000. At $10,000 is going to be carried over and added to whatever difference you're having to pay and the taxes and anything else that you buy. It's going to be added on to the amount financed on your new car because you lost money on that car when you traded it, and you financed more than you should have. See, cars are lousy investments. They are, but we don't buy them as investment. Well, some people don't. I do. I buy them as investments, but those are the cars that are sitting out here in my showroom or in my garage at my house or up at my storage building up at Green Outdoor. Yeah, those are investments because I always buy them with the end in mind, and I intend to make money, although I have lately, in recent months, failed miserably. Probably not near as bad as this guy did on this camper, but it was pretty ugly. And that was on a 65 Mustang convertible. Ooh, it still hurts just thinking about it. I don't think this guy paid $230-some thousand for this camp. Probably paid, I think I heard he paid $175 maybe. That's still a pretty brutal loss. But if you walk into a car dealership, especially some of the bad ones, and you don't know what your payoff is, and you haven't kind of figured out what your vehicle is worth, then you are at their mercy because that gives them the opportunity to play a lot of games with your head and to bury a lot of profit. Because many banks will finance, okay, let me explain this in simple terms. Let's say you have pretty good credit, you're 700 or better, and you're looking at a $50,000 car. Many banks will finance 130% of that. Now, not just banks, but credit unions. if you've got good credit, a good payment history, they'll finance $65,000 on a vehicle that lists for $50,000. Now, you're not paying $50,000 for it because you talked them down. Let's say you're just paying $47,500, plus you're getting a rebate. Now, if you didn't have the trade at all, you'd be in pretty good shape, but you have that trade. I'm sorry. And you owe $12,000 more than it's worth. So you take and what it's worth is what the banks, they want to know what the MSRP is. Some of them want to know what the invoice price is, what the dealer paid for the thing, but that's really none of their business. But anyway, you got the MSRP. They add your taxes and so forth, and then they add that $12,000 of negative equity. It's still under their threshold, so they'll finance it all. And then all of a sudden, well, not all of a sudden, but a year later, 2 years later, you get dissatisfied with that vehicle. Not only has it depreciated in value, but your payoff has not shrunk very much because you financed it for 84 months so you could get the payment where you wanted it. And you and your honey are sitting there at the dinner table, honey, how did we get $25,000 upside down on this vehicle? Well, depreciation got you. How much you financed got you. You bought it with no money down. You fell for that ad with that guy yelling, "We'll pay off your trade no matter how much you owe." Yep. They'll write the check, to the payoff bank, but you'll pay the payments. They don't say that part. You think, honey, they're going to pay off our trade no matter how much we owe. And I get it. It sounds appealing. I guess the real question here is how to avoid getting in that kind of a situation in the first place. We'll talk about that here in just a minute. Okay, so how do you avoid getting buried in a trade? Well, it all goes back to the transaction itself and whether you should even be shopping for a car at this point in your life, at this point in your financial life. I mean, you really have to think about that because I guarantee it, if you're way upside down right now and you don't really like your car, you've got all the wrong motives and the wrong situation to trade. You've just got to get rid of the emotion because that's driving you to make a foolish mistake. I mean, out there in the future somewhere, the two lines are going to intersect or get close to intersecting. That's the trade-in value and your payoff. And when those are really close to intersecting, or they intersected a few weeks ago, months ago, then you're in good shape to go in and trade as long as you know what the value of your vehicle is, because you don't want them to steal your vehicle, legally steal your vehicle. That sounds weird, doesn't it? That's when somebody pays you too little for your car and you don't realize it. So the simple cure for this is to find out in real numbers what your car's worth, relate that to your payoff amount, and then you're pretty much armed. And if you go in determined to hit the four targets from the guru, negotiate four different things: the selling price of the car, the actual cash value of your trade-in, the terms of your loan, that's the rate, and that's the number of months, and then the extended warranty, gap insurance, all the other stuff that you will be presented with. I mean, there's all kinds of different points here where you can get taken advantage of. So that's why you have to negotiate them separately. They get lumped together when all you're talking about, well, if you hit my $450 a month, I'm fine. You are just walking into a financial mistake, big mistake. That's why I talk about this so much, because people will, they'll go to Target or they'll go out to eat and they'll pay too much for a meal, and then they get their credit card bill. They've done it too many times, and they've spent all this extra money, but it's still hundreds and hundreds of dollars. I'm talking about saving you thousands of dollars. I'm talking about just like this good customer of ours who bought this camper. I mean, if he wasn't sure that he was going to love camping, then why buy an F450 and a 41-foot fifth wheel? I mean, go out and buy a pop-up. The mistakes will be smaller. I mean, that's how I started. I started with a pop-up. First time I went camping, we went to the Jellystone Campground just outside of Gatlinburg, Tennessee. And we set that thing. I was sweating. It was 98 degrees, and my kids were playing, swinging on the swing set. My wife was over there entertaining them, and I was trying to figure out how to get that thing set up. Finally, I got it set up. And then it was time to, light a fire outside and roast the marshmallows. I mean, I wouldn't trade that time for anything. But that night, in that campground, some guy had fallen in love with Achy Breaky Heart. And he played that song until about 2 a.m. And, they were hooping and hollering and having the best time. And I'm in there in this pop-up. You can't, I didn't have air conditioning. There was nothing I could turn on to drown out that sound. I was miserable. I said, I'm not doing this anymore. But I did. We went camping different places, but I never went to that campground again. But these are the things that you learn, the idea, the thought of camping sounds great, doesn't it? But then the reality hits, and it's a lot of work to get all set up, and to tear it all down. And we're going to, what is it called? Anchor Down, this big campground down near Dandridge on Douglas Lake. And it's the finest campground I've ever seen. And I made a reservation. We went there in 2023. I made a reservation. I said, I want this particular campsite. It's just I just love it. When can I possibly get that campsite? I'm thinking it could probably be, 6 months, maybe a year. 2.5 years. And that experience is coming up in April for me. So I still have my camper. So I will at least I'm going to get one camp out of my camper this year. But that's really not enough to justify. I think I paid like $40,000 or something like that for that camper. Go to a hotel. It makes a lot more sense. Well, folks, thanks for listening to this edition of My Car Guru. Again, if you have any questions, 423-552-2020. That's my cell phone number. Or email LennyLawson2020 @gmail.com, and I'll see you next time.